All right, welcome to Intro to Premiere Part 6. We'll now be looking at audio effects. This is going to be a bit shorter of a section, I would say, because really, and I'll say this first and foremost, and I know I talked about Pro Tools a lot in the fifth section of Premiere, but again, if you are planning on doing something professionally, finalizing a film to the highest quality possible, you'll want to move your film into Pro Tools for all of this. Um, Really affecting is something that you would do during a picture edit on a very, very minimal basis. And the primary reason for that, if you are indeed moving over into Pro Tools, is that all of these things that I'm talking about right now get tossed out the window when you make an export into Pro Tools. We export either an OMF or an AAF file, and any audio effect that you place on an audio clip will disappear once we export that OMF and AAF file and bring our work into Pro Tools. So while all of the other things that we covered in the last section as far as editing your audio, volume automation, panning, crossfading, does all carry over into Pro Tools, and all of your work, all of your preliminary audio work that you would want to do does carry over. All of the audio effects do not. So this section is really just about perhaps looking at a smattering of the audio effects that might actually help you when you're making a very quick project that you don't intend to put into Pro Tools, but you just need it to be prettied up a little bit more, or have some fun stuff happen to it. Or perhaps you just need to do this because you don't own Pro Tools, or have a contact with someone that can do some Pro Tools work for you. So yeah, with that said, let's get into it. I have a couple of clips. These are the same clips I had in the last section. A generic sports broadcast, and I didn't actually use this one. It's the Batman theme song from the 60s. Let me stretch those out a little bit more so we can take a look at them. And yeah, we'll put some effects on here to see what happens. So yeah, under our effects tab, as per usual, we visited this a few times now, we have audio effects. And we have a few different folders here. As you can see, there are a few that are not in folders. And they're pretty basic ones, I guess, and that's why they didn't stick them into folders. But yeah, we won't look at, again, all of these. Just like in the intro part 3, we did not go through line by line and look at every single video effect. They're yours to explore, really. In addition, just to repeat myself again, it's not like you would use many of these anyway if you're working on something professionally and moving to Pro Tools. Yeah, let's look at these 3 independent ones first. So there's a balance clip here, and it says, like, while I hovered over it, it can only be used on a stereo clip. So I'll put that on my Batman theme song here. I'll double click on the clip, go to the effects controls, and yeah, as you can see, it basically is a stereo panning manipulation device. So if you wanted to pan your stereo clip so it's more left heavy or more right heavy, that's what that's all about. That's all it is, honestly. And it looks like it just mirrors what we can do with the balance panning in a stereo clip anyway. So it's a redundant effect, actually. I'm really not sure why they put an extra one in there. Mute, you just drag and drop that onto a clip and it mutes it. So if you need to just mute a clip in your timeline, that's kind of a handy thing to do. Say, like, we call these X tracks, actually, professionally, when we put a piece of audio in our timeline and we're not sure if we want to use it or not, but we just want to mute that one clip in particular. Instead of putting it in one whole track and muting that track, we could just drag and drop this onto a clip and it mutes it. So case in point,
The NHL tonight,
I'll probably have to turn it on. Yeah, just turn mute to 1, I guess. And then if you want to remove the mute, just click on mute like any other effect, of course, as we've been moving through, highlight it, and delete. So same as using effects with picture, you just click on the name of the effect and delete it to move it with any audio effect. And it looks like there's just an extra volume effect as well, and I suppose that just gives me an extra 15 decibels of volume, which is, yeah, it's very odd. So there are then, therefore, 3 different places to affect your volume if you'd want, or multiple, because there's the volume line that you have by default. You can add as many more volume lines as you want in here. And then, as we looked at before, there's the audio mixing window, which has a separate volume control as well. Plus, I could go in and go to the audio options, audio gain, and gain my levels up and down there. So there's many different ways of adjusting volume in Premiere, strangely enough. So, yeah, just a secondary volume. But yeah, let's just go through and look at what these different categories are. Some of them I'll really just breeze over. While others I think might be actually a bit more beneficial to you if you're doing something in Premiere and staying in Premiere and will be exporting your final film from Premiere. So we have some amplitude and compression, so this all just works with the loudness of your audio. And most of this I think you don't really need to touch. There's amplify, I'm sure that's just another volume, which is kind of funny. Channel mixer, I think that would probably sweep through your different channels of audio. Oh, it can only go on a stereo. Okay, so yeah, it again is a balance, left-right output. So again, not really all that different than the balance effect that we just looked at, actually. You can tell as I'm going through these how some of them I'm like, what does this do? Because I really don't touch these effects all that much. I'm a Pro Tools user, so if I'm doing any kind of audio work, I'm doing it in Pro Tools. So I'm just kind of spitballing here a little bit. De-esser is really interesting, so that would take away sibilance. So if you have someone that has a lot of S sounds when they talk, this will tamper down on that. There's also dynamics and dynamics processing. Not quite sure what the difference between the two would be. But yeah, as I click on that, there's actually a lot of these audio effects I know have these edit buttons, because you're like, okay, where are all the parameters? Well, there's individual parameters here, but if you go to edit, it gives you kind of a nicer like kind of knob situation here. So, okay, I see what this includes. So it includes a gate, a compressor, and expander. Now that's getting a little bit too complex when we're just talking about picture editing. But the one that I think that we should really just look at is compressor. Honestly, a gate or an expander, I would only use when I'm dealing with music tracks, like individual music tracks like guitars, drums, etc. With film sound, really we only deal with ever compression. Compression is essentially a way to mitigate the level of our overall volume. So if, especially on dialogue. So it's really used exclusively in film on dialogue tracks, I would say, for getting a dialogue performance that you might have in some places really loud and exuberant and other places very quiet, because of course actors can be all over the place with their performance. So yeah, that's the best way that I could explain it, really simply, just for the purposes of this lab, I'd say. It just helps bring down the loud instances of your audio and bring up the quieter instances. And so I'll just give you a really quick, sort of tutorial on maybe where some good settings would be for this if you want to use it. I mean, I've never really used this. I use one in Pro Tools, of course, or sets of ones in Pro Tools. So for this compressor, I'd probably want to click on compressor to activate it. I'd want to make my ratio about 2.5, I'd say. That's a good ratio. That has to do with how much the dialogue level is being compressed or squashed back down to a lower volume level. And then really the threshold depends on what we see in the compressor meter. So I'm going to play this.
Leafs throttled the Canucks 9-2, and the Oilers needed overtime to beat the Rangers 1-0. In the NHL tonight, the Flyers put their first-place lead on the line.
And my attack and my release should be a lot bigger too, actually. So these are very slow attack. I would want that at least 10 milliseconds, and this probably at least 100 or so. So that's how fast the compressor works, actually. So let's see.
Put their first-place lead on the line in a game with the Capitals.
A
win for the Caps.
I'm really looking at this meter for my threshold. It's all going to change. The threshold is the one thing that's going to change. So you can solidly think, okay, 2.5 is good. Turn my attack all the way up, my release to about 100. But the threshold's really going to depend on the clip that you're using. And that's why you got to look at this little meter here. I wouldn't want this red line to go much lower than -6, so between 0 and 12. Or else I'm going to start to hear it be overly compressed.
In the NHL tonight, the Flyers put their first-place lead on the line in a game with the Capitals.
Yeah, so that's pretty good. I mean, this dialogue performance, if you want to call it a performance, is pretty well maintained and compressed anyway, so it's not really all over the place. But those seem to be pretty good settings to maybe help it out a little bit. And then I've got a makeup gain, which makes it louder after the fact, so therefore bringing the quieter stuff back up to meet it. So, yeah, so you can kind of think of those are some good settings for dialogue if you really want to stick in Premiere and help your dialogue out a little bit. And this way you don't have to do so much dialogue volume automation. So a lot of beginners to this, I think, go in and really start pointing and clicking with the pin tool. Oh, this dialogue's a little bit quieter there. Oh, it's a little bit louder there. I need to bring it down there. Oh, it needs to come up there. You don't have to do as much of that when you use a compressor. So that's a really big tip to use. If you really need to keep things in Premiere, aren't going to Pro Tools, a compressor will very much help even out the levels of your dialogue. So compressors can get a lot more complicated than this. But this is a very basic one to keep in your pocket, I suppose. So okay, I'll get rid of that. I'm just curious to see what the difference is between dynamics processing. So if we edit this, and yeah, it's just a slightly different compressor. And yeah, this one's not very helpful. It doesn't have your traditional type compression controls that we usually see. The rest of these things we've got single band compressor. A limiter is really not for film sound. It's really funny how they put a lot of audio effects in here that we really wouldn't use for film sound. There are things that I would use more so for music manipulation. So you'll find a lot of these similar type effects in Pro Tools, but that's because Pro Tools is also used for music. So it confuses me because Premiere is really just used for video and film. So why are they putting music manipulation stuff in? So limiting is a very extreme version of compression that we do not need to use for film. I'm curious about the single band compressor too. Let's see what that looks like. And it's a lot simpler looking, but yeah, you can see that there's a threshold, a ratio, an attack and a release, and an output gain. So it has the same controls as the other one, but I see it doesn't have a little meter to help us gauge where the threshold should be. So that's not helpful at all. Yeah. Another thing about these Pro Tools or these Premiere effects is they really look not very dynamic compared to Pro Tools. Like the ones in Pro Tools look way cooler. They're much easier to use. They're super visual. They have a lot more meters and things that help you achieve what you want to achieve. So these are really bare bones looking at them. Anyway, so that's all with dynamics. Delay and echo will give you echo effects, delay effects. So those are kind of fun ones to deal with. If I just plop this on. Let's see what that does.
Tonight, the Flyers put their first place lead on the line in the game with.
So you can see we get like a second delay. I can make more delays by bringing up the feedback, and that'll sound crazier.
A win for the Capitals. A win for the Capitals. First place. We're down to the second last. We're down to the second last week of football in the National.
So we get a lot of echoes there. So yeah, that's what a delay will do. You can play around with those if you really think that's more of a creative effect. EQ, so that's the other kind of practical effect to use, I'd say, with film sound. Really, there's no film that I've worked on where I don't use compression, especially on the dialogue, and some EQ, especially on the dialogue, and some other things as well. So there's lots of different EQs in here. Again, some that I'd say are more designed for music, oddly enough, being in here. But I'm just gonna go over probably just two really basic ones that I think can help you achieve most of what you'd want to achieve on a very basic level in Premiere, and that's what I'm clicking on now, the high pass and the low pass. So those will cut off frequencies, so that's what EQs will do, manipulate what frequencies we're hearing, the lows, the mids, the highs. All of you have, watching this, I'm sure have messed around with an EQ before. If you've ever messed around with a car stereo EQ or a personal stereo EQ, where you got a bass, a treble, and a mid, that's a very basic EQ. But the high pass and the low pass can really help out with a bit of cleanup and a bit of manipulation. So the high pass will cut out the low frequencies, hence letting the high frequencies pass through. The low pass will do the opposite, letting the low frequencies pass through, thereby cutting out the highs. Let's look at that one first. If I drop that on there, there's just a cutoff, and that's the only control you get. Very, very simple. And the more and more I bring the cutoff down, the more and more high frequencies I'll get rid of. So if I play this and manipulate it as I'm playing it, you'll hear me bring out more and more of the high frequencies.
Leafs throttled the Canucks 9-2, and the Oilers needed overtime to beat the Rangers.
Yeah, and there's not much dialogue that exists below 100 hertz. So once I get to like 100 hertz, we get like nothing. It's just a little bit of murmuring. So yeah, this can help like with muffling something, making something sound like it's coming from behind a wall, behind a closed door. So yeah, this is kind of fun. Let's take a look at our Batman music here. Okay, so that's a little loud. Sorry about that. Bring it down a few dB. If I put the low pass on it, we can get the sensation like our, oops, that's not the cutoff. Our music is being blasted by a neighbor next door. They're really grooving on some old television. So yeah, I mean, that's kind of a fun effect to use. Very easy creative effect to use to muffle something, whether it's behind a wall, like I said. You could also use it if someone is underwater. We don't really hear high frequencies underwater either. So very helpful effect there. Going back to my dialogue clip, let's put on the high pass as well. So the high pass will do the opposite. So as I play, I'll go the opposite direction with it. As I play this, it'll take out more and more of the low end.
3 times, helping the Penguins pass the Jets 8-3. The Leafs throttled the Canucks 9-2, and the Oilers needed overtime to beat the Rangers 1-0.
Yeah. So, and then once I get to about 10 or 11,000, that's where dialogue starts to cut off, and we barely hear it. Yeah, and that can help with maybe making things a little more tinny. You might think that, oh, this is what I do to make something sound like it's coming from a speaker, a phone, a television, something like that. And you're halfway there, but the thing is, you know, like we're not only, when we're hearing sound being played from a television, a radio, a cell phone, in film especially, you know, like we get this effect applied to it to make the viewer realize that we're listening to a disembodied voice that's not on screen. that we're hearing a combination of both the low end and the high end being taken out. So I would actually recommend using both the high pass and the low pass in conjunction. So I would bring up maybe the high pass to there, the low pass down to here, and we would get kind of like a phone call type.
NHL tonight, the Flyers put their first place lead on the line in a game with the Capitals.
And yeah, I could bring it even more if it's supposed to be a really crappy speaker.
A win for the Caps would create a first place tie. We're down to the second last.
Or if it's a bit better fidelity of a sound system, but we still want to make it sound like we're cutting things off.
Last week of play in the National Football League, the Rams can clinch a division.
So yeah, the more and more you bring them closer together, the high pass and the low pass, the more and more effective it'll be. But from a technical standpoint, we can use this to help clean up our dialogue as well, or any recordings that we made on set. Like I said, dialogue starts at about 100 hertz and goes to 10 or 11,000 hertz. So I could cut off my high pass at around 100 or so, and cut off the low pass at around 10 or 11,000 or so. And there is really no dialogue up this way or down this way that's going to be affected. It's going to be pretty much sound the same.
In the NHL tonight, the Flyers put their first place lead.
Yeah, because there's really no dialogue, hardly at all, frequencies that come through those spots. But what can come through those spots are in the low end. That's where you get traffic rumble, some boom handling noise, some really low end garbage like that. So that can really help get out some of this low end crap we don't need. And then from the high end, that area we don't really. There might be some like light buzzing or some static hum or something like that, so that'll get that kind of out too. Now, this isn't a catch-all to totally clean up dialogue. If you have noise in your dialogue, like from refrigerators, from something that's uncontrollably noisy on set, really the only thing that will fix that is noise reduction. And I believe we're getting to it, but yeah, there is some noise reduction in Premiere, but it is not the greatest. Anyway, that's a good look at two EQs that can help you out immensely. Modulation, we have, these are totally musical related stuff. We don't even get these by default in Pro Tools. We actually have to get like third-party effects, or what we call plugins in Pro Tools, to get these to work. They'll just make things kind of sound funky and weird. Let's see if I put the flanger on here.
The Flyers put their first place lead on the line in a game with the Capitals. A win for the Caps would create a first place tie. We're down to the second last week of play in the National Football League. The Rams can clinch a division.
So you can hear it's kind of like messing up the audio, making it a little warbly sounding. That's what all of these things will do. Their modulation effects means that there's this parameter that's modulating back and forth to create this kind of warbly sound.
And in a game with the Capitals, a win for the Caps would create a first place tie.
So yeah, you can just kind of play around with these if you want, but it's not like they're standards for film sound. I mean, maybe you'd want to put them on a sound effect to make it sound kind of fun. Under noise reduction, we do have these de-hummers, de-noise, de-reverb. I've really not had much success with them. De-reverb's brand new, actually. This hasn't been around for a while. It's very, very, very hard to extract reverb from a recording. Almost like impossible. Yeah, I'm very, very doubtful for any of these to work. You could try them, but you're going to hear some degradation in your audio at the same time. So while you're trying to fix your audio that doesn't sound so great in the first place, you're going to add a new kind of like weirdness to it. So on one hand, it might take away some humming, some noise, or some reverb, but on the other hand, I almost guarantee you that you'll hear something else weird going on with it. It usually makes things sound kind of swimmy, kind of similar to the effect that we just listened to under modulation. We'll make it sound like that. So, I mean, case in point, let's just take the denoise on here, even though this doesn't really have any noise to be reduced. And let's see what happens when we denoise it.
The Flames, 7-6. Dan Quinn scored 3 times, helping the Penguins pass the Jets 8-3. The Leafs throttled the Canucks 9-2, and the Oilers needed overtime to beat the Rangers 1-0. In the NHL...
Well, it's not really doing much because there's not really much noise in this thing. Um, so very bad example, but if you do have a clip that is noisy, you can try it, but don't count on being not disappointed, I would say. There's much better noise reduction software that you can get. You can get third-party plugins and Pro Tools that are great. There's iZotope RX, which is a dedicated program to take out noise. It is brilliant. So if you're really interested in cleaning up audio and getting more into that profession, Premiere is not where you stay. This is kind of a half measure that might work if you're working on something in Premiere and staying in Premiere and seeing what happens. Let's see, then we got some reverbs. Reverbs are fun. Of course, they'll make things sound like they're in a space.
Well, tonight, the Flyers put their first-place lead on the line in a game with the Capitals. A win for the Caps would create a first-place tie. We're down to the second last week of play in the National Football League. The Rams can clinch a divisional
So yeah, make something sound like it's in a space. Very, very common effect. I'd say that it's probably number 3 after EQ and compression on use for film sound. So it's a very common thing to use. You know, we want to put reverb on ADR and Foley that's been recorded in a studio because it just sounds too clean. But yeah, and we can also use it to make things sound dreamy, surreal, you know, those kind of qualities. Reverb's really fun to use, so that might be an interesting one to use in here. One thing to make note of, though, it's very weird that when your clip ends, the reverb ends, or the effect will end. So that's not what happens in other audio editing programs like Pro Tools. But yeah, when I play this,
play in the National Football League, the Rams can clinch a divisional.
Yeah, when the clip stops, the reverb does not keep going and reverberate out. It just cuts it off. So that's one thing to keep in mind. This reverb really only works as the clip is playing. Other programs like Pro Tools do not do that. Special. Okay, so other kind of fun ones in here. It looks like, you know, we can invert something that actually just flips the waveform upside down, which doesn't really do anything. Again, that's more for mixing music in my experience. Distortion. You know, that's again something musical. Usually we'd put distortion on a guitar.
Tonight.
Wow, that really cranked it. Sorry about that.
The Flyers put their first-place lead on the line in a game with the Capitals. A win for the Caps would create.
Yeah, so it just makes it sound kind of nasty. Great. So that's all. I mean, these are all really, as I look through these swap channels, vocal. Yeah, these are definitely all things that I would use with music mixing. Again, very strange they're in here. Stereo expander. Let's see. That's just, I guess, helps expand your stereo. I thought it would be making the ability to make mono clip sound stereofied, but no, it can only be used on stereo or 5.1 clips. Probably just expands the left and right orientation sound. Really not that big of a deal. Pitch shifter, that's a fun one. Pitch shifting's always fun, so if you want to change somebody's pitch around, transpose ratio, that's all we get.
The Flyers put their first-place
lead on the line in a game with the Capitals. A win for the Caps
would create
a first-place tie. We're down to the second last week of play
in the National.
Okay, so that's fun. Not sure why you'd want to use that. I mean, you can use it really subtly to make, like, say, I mean, this would only really apply to animation. If you recorded a woman's voice, you could make them sound more like a child if you pitch it up a little bit. That happens a lot in animation. But yeah, otherwise it's maybe for if you want to disguise someone's voice, like in a documentary, you could put that pitch shifter on, turn the transposition all the way down.
NHL tonight, the Flyers put their first-place lead on the line in a game with the Capitals. A win for the Caps would create a first-place tie.
Yeah, so if you're working on a documentary where someone's identity needs to be concealed, you know, you like shoot them like with a shadow on their face, yeah, maybe that might be helpful for that. Great, and then there's some last ones here. Okay, I see. These are just some other categories of sounds, and wow, they've added a lot. This is all very new to Premiere, actually. This is a giant list. Oh, actually, you probably don't see these on your end. Now that I'm looking at this, these are all my plugins that I use in Pro Tools. So you won't have those. You won't have most of these, I'd say. You might have a couple of them. Yeah, there's like this this series of Apple effects, which have exactly the same thing as what we've been looking at. You can see there's delay, distortion, high pass, low pass, reverb, pitch shift. So just a different version of the same stuff we looked at. I also have iZotope, so that's why I'm getting these iZotope plugins as well. So you won't see Waves and iZotope and probably not Sennheiser on your end. That's just because it's looking at my computer and I have all this special stuff. Same thing with these VST3s. These are definitely all, yeah, these are all my plugins that I have them in Pro Tools, and I guess Premiere is identifying them as well. So that's kind of cool. It's letting me use my special plugins in Premiere if I wanted to. Great. So that's just a really quick smattering of effects in Premiere. If you will be moving forward with Pro Tools, for example, like with me in class, we'll get much more in depth in Pro Tools in that arena. But yeah, if you're just watching these, if you have me for editing, this is as far as we're going as far as effects are for in Premiere. But I think I've given you enough little background in them to use what effects you might need while you're in an edit. And again, I think that's important to reiterate, is that this is all just for staying in Premiere, not finishing professionally in Pro Tools, using some of these effects to maybe help your sound be a little bit more presentable or affected the way that you would want it to be while you're still in Premiere, or making something that you plan on finishing in Premiere. So yeah, those big ones again would be compression, the high pass, low pass EQs, and in my book I'd say reverb, and all the other ones that I looked over, the pitch shifting, the delay, the modulation effects, all those other weird ones are kind of just fun ones for affecting your sound effects if you'd like. Yeah, so that's it. Hope that was fun and was kind of entertaining for me too to go through these. I usually don't use these, but yeah, that gives you some more ammo in Premiere. So I hope you enjoyed that, and happy affecting in Premiere.